Welcome and thank you for joining us today. Sonnet Hill, David Hockletubby, gerontologist. And today we're going to be talking about some obvious signs that your loved one needs senior care. Before we even get into that, what I'd like to explain is that the vast majority of Americans wait until there is a crisis to even consider looking for care. Some say they're trying to respect their elder by allowing them to have those last days in their home and not try to create a role reversal, which we're going to get to in a second. But my question is it really respect or is it neglect? Is it the avoidance of a very difficult conversation and not able to follow through and perform due diligence? I have a feeling it's a bit of both. So today we're going to talk about overcoming obstacles. We're going to talk about the warning signs, and I'm going to encourage you to go down the right path, the path of due diligence. A word on role reversal, however. As a seasoned college instructor, I had the opportunity to have a multicultural perspective in that my students were from many different countries, going through the Gerontology Master of Arts program. And one woman in particular tilted her head sideways and said, "I don't understand what you mean by role reversal," in speaking about an adult child assuming the role of caregiver to their senior. And I said, that's an American concept, that we feel that it is the reverse of the original relationship role, which is that the adult takes care of the child. And she said, well, where I come from, and she was from India, she said, in my village, we have a saying. And roughly translated, it's once a man, twice a child. So the expectation is when you're born, you have incontinence, you have issues with eating, you have issues with ambulation, with wandering, with mood swings, with elopement, etc. And then you have a nice arc to your life, and you return back with no shame, but rather expectation to incontinence and ambulation issues and eating issues. And it's expected. And that is an important word right there, because a really quick and dirty definition of disappointment is expectations not met. So if you're expecting that you're going to reassume a caregiver role for your loved one, for your parent, then the expectations are met at a reasonable level, and you don't have that disappointment. So in her culture, in her village, they had it nailed. Once a man, twice a child. So that nobody's in shock. Oh, what do you mean I have to take care of my parent? Didn't see that coming. Well, of course. How could you not have seen it coming? We've got things wrong in the United States. So some of the things that you want to look for when you are visiting your senior, and that are very common warning signs, and I'll go kind of room by room in a sense. The first place you want to visit is the kitchen. The kitchen is probably the most dangerous room in anyone's household, probably second only to a bathroom. And oftentimes you'll find signs of fire. You'll see cookware that has been burnt up or that is missing because it's been thrown away and hidden. Or when you open the pantry, similar to my grandmother, when the judgment center of the brain starts to deteriorate, you start to function on a basic level. And that basic level is also a libidinal level. So the things that you want to consume are now the things that you're purchasing, rather than the staples like eggs and milk and bread and cheese and poultry and meat. Instead, you might find a pantry lined with chocolate, which is exactly the case of my grandmother, who was an insatiable chocolate eater. Yet we knew that she was slipping because all that we found in her pantry were burned up cooking utensils and chocolate. It's clearly on the other side. The other place that you're definitely going to want to visit would be the bathroom, or wherever there's medication being stored. This is a pretty good indicator that they're either not tracking their medications. You'll find expired medications, most likely. You'll find what I call the commingled medications, especially if they're spouses living together. Or the dreaded, I call it the Skittles drawer. When I used to do assessments in home, I would find the one drawer, I'd pull it open, and all these pills would start rolling out, different colors and shapes, not in a pill bottle, and certainly not being managed properly. They're just taking pills willy-nilly, or they're taking too many pills, or they're not taking enough pills, or they're taking their spouse's pills. Obviously, opportunity for extreme danger. And then in general, what's the overall ambience of the house itself? Are there extreme areas of clutter which are presenting trip hazards, undone piles of laundry, piling up? Is the house odoriferous in any way? When I used to do the assessments for my residents, I insisted that I go to their home rather than for them to come to me. First of all, they get the white coat issues where they may get really up for the assessment because they know they're under the gun, or they might actually underperform because they're really intimidated by a gerontologist or nurse. So I would go to the home, partially, of course, to see the even playing field in terms of their cognition and being comfortable in their own home. But also, you can tell me that your loved one's not incontinent, but when I walk in the door, I will know. And while some people hide it out of shame, other people may not even be aware. But I can tell you once I walk through the door if there's an incontinence issue. So I don't even have to bring it up at that point. Which also brings me to the mystery spots on the floor. I don't want to go into great detail. I think you know where I'm going with this. Sometimes it's food, sometimes it's not food, or maybe it once was food. You want to look for spoiled food. On the subject of food, back to the kitchen, you want to look for the spoiled food that's not being thrown away, or the items that are well past their expiration date, like milk that's basically a solid now. Around the house, you might also find unopened bits of mail that are really antiquated, late notices, bounced checks. You're listening to their answering machine or voicemail and you're hearing repetitive calls of bills not being paid, or they're overpaying some bills and you've got collectors coming. Maybe a utility or two have been cut off once or in the past. Then you start to address these findings with your loved one, of course, with empathy and a lot of ginger approach, and note their reaction. If they become extraordinarily defensive and they're dodging questions, or if you ask a direct question and they can't come up with a specific answer or give you a vague answer, don't press them, just commit it to memory and know that those are signs. Or if you are dealing with spousal couples, so you've got a higher functioning husband, a lower functioning wife, you ask mom a question and he jumps in right away and answers it for her, and then she just agrees. That's the teamwork, and believe me, that happens more often than not. You'll see the overcompensating of one of the two depending on who's got the greater skill set, and they try to do it as a team, and it's of course out of fear. Then you'll notice difficulty keeping track of time. You'll get repetitive phone calls, or phone calls that are oddly timed, like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and they're not really tracking what time of day it is, or that it's an inappropriate time to call. As you go down the path, you might find that they're sleeping a good portion of the day. Their circadian rhythm is thrown off. Maybe they've lost some weight because of their poor diet, or maybe gained weight, like in the case of Nana, where she was eating nothing but chocolate. Then you'll start to see also signs that maybe they've lost interest in their hobbies. Maybe they cannot navigate their hobbies any longer, and that's why they lose interest, because they can't have that stream of cognition that allows them to participate as they normally would. And then, of course, that's going to lead to changes in mood or extreme mood swings, especially when someone is aware of their issues. They're going to get frustrated, and it's not really a question of why would they have mood swings. It's really a question of why wouldn't they have a mood swing. Difficulty getting up from a seated position. Of course, this leads to potential falls in the future. Difficulty with balance, watching their gait or their mobility and how they step each step. Are they stutter stepping? Are they shuffling? Are they about to catch the front of their foot on some sort of surface and fall forward? Which leads to the next one, unexplained bruising or injury. Visible. The skin becomes paper thin at a certain age and you can't hide those skin tears. And of course the bruising also ramps up, especially with certain medication use. So be looking for that. If you walk in the house and it's a very warm day and they're wearing long sleeve shirt and long pants, you may want to inquire as to why. Or perhaps, again, thinking about these warning signs, are they appropriately dressing themselves every day? Forgetfulness. I mean, that's an obvious one that would probably lead you to this. But if you're visiting them for now because of the COVID-19 issue or over the holidays is a very common time where we as an industry of assisted living see a spike in our inquiries and move-ins around January, February. The families see this starting in Thanksgiving timeframe. And then as the spiritual holidays move forward, they say, well, one last, whatever it is, Hanukkah, Christmas, Kwanzaa in their home, and then they make the decision January 1st, and they typically move in by February 1st. This is when you're starting to see that there's forgetfulness, that they're not able to make their doctor's appointments, that they're missing things, that they're losing items that they're claiming that are being stolen. And of course, in most cases, they're living alone, so who would steal them? Constant, consistent use of poor judgment, falling for phone scams or giving away money to charities. Then you'll start to have the odoriferous issues of unpleasant body odor due to a lack of self-care, inappropriate levels of showering or infrequent showering or bathing, strong smell of urine perhaps in the house, and then a notable decline in grooming habits, men with extraordinarily long beards or longer hair like mine today. Boy, I miss Kelly like crazy. And Kelly, if you're watching, I miss you. I need a haircut bad. This is getting out of hand. But not so funny when it's your loved one and they do have access to a barber or a beautician. You're starting to see that their hair is getting unkept or uncolored. Whatever their old way of managing themselves is no longer the case. And then, of course, the lack of oral care. That is so essential and can lead to a whole number of different issues if not managed properly, especially if they're not managing their dentures well. And then, of course, their inability to independently complete their activities of daily living, which is grooming, dressing, showering, toileting, and then the eating process. And then last on my list, and there are many more, it concerns me the most is if your loved one is still driving. And newsflash, it doesn't take a piece of paper to start a car. It just takes a key. So if you've had their agreement that they're no longer driving, or if the DMV has revoked their license with short-term memory loss or with desperation and fear, it only takes a key to turn on the car. And if you notice that they've been driving and they shouldn't be, or if there are dents in the fender, or it's obvious that they shouldn't be driving anymore and you haven't taken action yet, it is most definitely time to take that action. So that's enough to chew on today. As always, Sonnet Hill is here for you. David Hockletubby is here for you. Been in the field for 23 years. I know this backwards and forwards. This is my passion. I want to be able to answer your questions and above all, help you navigate through this process. And there, I will leave you with one last thing to meditate on. There are two paths to take on this journey. And they have two very different outcomes. The first path is of inaction, of allowing this to go until there is a major problem. And if you travel that path, it will only lead you to regret. And if you get to that point of crisis, oftentimes you cannot retrace your steps back down that path and re-enter the other path, which is the path of due diligence. That path leads you through a fire that you've got to be courageous enough to walk through, have that love for your loved one driving you through that fire, galvanizing you throughout the process. But on the other side of that path of due diligence is validation. And that's where I want to see all of you. Validated that you stepped up, that you addressed that faux role reversal, as we call it in the United States, and you tackled a problem and you conquered it. And you not only created a longer quantity of life for your loved one, but for your whole family system, you've improved the quality of life. And that's what Sonnet Hill and I am here to do for all of you. So thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share this. This information should be broadcast to everyone. It's necessary, but unfortunately, it's not a wide enough discussed topic in the public. So until next time, take care of yourselves.